Daniel Harris was the kind of man people described as dependable. At 30 years old, he had carved out a steady reputation at Whitmore Industries, a mid-sized firm in Chicago specializing in luxury textiles. Daniel had started as a junior associate and, through years of grit and late nights, worked his way into a respected project manager role. He wasn't loud, he wasn't political, and he never tried to steal the spotlight. He simply believed that good work spoke for itself. His closest friend in the office was Michael Turner. From the moment Daniel joined the company, Michael was by his side, lunch breaks together, weekend basketball games, even late-night drinks after particularly stressful weeks. Daniel considered Michael more than a coworker, he was a brother. They often shared their personal struggles, and Daniel had even helped Michael pay rent once when he was struggling financially. "If I can't trust Michael," Daniel often said, "then I can't trust anyone." But trust, Daniel was about to discover, could be more dangerous than betrayal itself. When the company announced a promotion for senior operations manager, Daniel and Michael quickly became the top two contenders. The role wasn't just a bigger paycheck, it was influence, leadership, and a guaranteed future with the firm. Daniel had worked tirelessly for it. He stayed late every night, triple-checked every report, and even sacrificed weekends to ensure client satisfaction. Michael, meanwhile, smiled at Daniel and said, "This job has your name written all over it. Honestly, I'd rather work under you than anyone else." But Michael's words were nothing more than smoke. Behind Daniel's back, Michael was carefully orchestrating a campaign. He began presenting Daniel's ideas as his own during meetings, making small adjustments so it wouldn't be obvious. He whispered to supervisors that Daniel seemed burned out and sloppy with details. At one point, he deliberately handed Daniel flawed data sheets, knowing Daniel trusted him too much to double-check. When those sheets reached the higher-ups, Daniel was blamed for carelessness. Daniel never suspected a thing. He trusted Michael blindly, believing his friend would never betray him. The day of the announcement arrived. The office gathered in the conference hall, the air buzzing with anticipation. Daniel's heart pounded as he took a seat near the front. He thought about all the nights he had left the office long after dark, the sacrifices he had made, and the relentless dedication that had cost him friendships and even a relationship. Today, he thought, it would all pay off. Mr. Whitmore, the company's founder, stood at the podium. He smiled broadly as he announced, "I am proud to share that our new senior operations manager will be Michael Turner." The room erupted in applause. But for Daniel, the sound was muffled, distant, like a cruel echo in a nightmare. His chest tightened, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse. He forced himself to clap, though his palms stung with each strike. Michael strutted to the front of the room, shaking hands and soaking in the praise. When he returned to his seat, he leaned down and gave Daniel a firm pat on the back. In a low voice, almost mocking, he whispered, "It's nothing personal, Dan. Just business." Those words carved into Daniel like a blade. That night, Daniel sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every memory, the laughs, the trust, the loyalty he had poured into a friendship that now felt like poison. His tears didn't last long. Slowly, a new fire ignited inside him. Not sorrow. Not despair. But revenge. Daniel had always believed that life rewarded honesty, that hard work would eventually pay off. But betrayal changes people. In the weeks following Michael's promotion, Daniel felt like a ghost in the office. His colleagues congratulated Michael, and Michael strutted through the halls with a confidence that made Daniel sick. He wasn't just promoted, he was now Daniel's direct supervisor. The humiliation burned deeper every day. Michael had the nerve to treat Daniel like an afterthought, assigning him menial tasks while taking the credit for larger projects. Sometimes, during meetings, Michael would make condescending jokes at Daniel's expense, and the room would chuckle nervously. To everyone else, it looked like harmless teasing. To Daniel, it was salt in an open wound. Daniel could have quit. He could have walked out, updated his resume, and started over. But every time he considered it, Michael's words replayed in his mind, "It's nothing personal, Dan. Just business." No, Daniel thought. This wasn't over. He didn't want to just leave. He wanted to watch Michael fall, and fall hard. That was when the plan began to form. Daniel knew Michael's strengths, but more importantly, he knew his weaknesses. Michael was ambitious, yes, but also arrogant. He loved shortcuts, preferred charm over effort, and cut corners whenever he thought no one was watching. Daniel had seen it firsthand for years, but never said anything back when they were friends. Now, those same flaws were weapons waiting to be used. The first step was patience. Daniel played his role as the quiet, defeated employee. He smiled when Michael gloated. He nodded when Michael barked orders. He even congratulated him publicly, pretending the betrayal had been forgiven. Slowly, Michael began to relax. Dan's no threat, Michael probably thought. And that's exactly what Daniel wanted him to believe. Meanwhile, Daniel worked silently, collecting evidence. He started keeping copies of every report Michael altered, every inflated expense account, every false claim Michael made in meetings. He built a hidden file on his home computer, documenting every instance of Michael cutting corners or manipulating data. But Daniel didn't stop there. He began to plant subtle traps. When Michael asked Daniel to draft a client proposal, Daniel made sure to add small, deliberate errors that Michael, in his arrogance, would overlook. Then, when the proposal reached the client, Michael looked careless, but Daniel always had a corrected version ready to step in and save the day. Clients began noticing the difference. Michael seemed sloppy, while Daniel appeared competent and reliable. In private conversations with colleagues, Daniel dropped quiet hints. "Michael's under a lot of pressure," he would say, with just the right tone of concern. "I hope he doesn't take too many risks. You know how he gets." He never accused Michael outright, he simply planted seeds of doubt. The seeds began to grow. By the third month of Michael's tenure as manager, whispers had started spreading. Clients were frustrated with errors, budgets were off balance, and deadlines were missed. Daniel, on the other hand, quietly fixed problems, staying late when no one asked him to, ensuring that projects were salvaged. The final piece of Daniel's plan required timing. He knew that Whitmore Industries was preparing for a massive contract pitch with an international client, a deal that could secure millions for the firm. Michael, of course, was leading the presentation. He strutted around the office, boasting about how he would seal the deal. Daniel waited until the night before the pitch. He carefully reviewed Michael's presentation slides, which Michael had lazily thrown together. Buried within them were exaggerated claims and false data, mistakes that would crumble under scrutiny. Daniel didn't correct them. Instead, he prepared his own clean, professional version of the pitch, saving it quietly on his laptop. The next morning, as the boardroom filled with executives and the international clients, Michael stood tall, radiating confidence. He began the presentation, clicking through the slides Daniel had allowed him to use. It didn't take long for the questions to start. "Are these numbers accurate?" one executive asked, frowning. "These projections don't align with the reports we received," another said. Michael stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. His arrogance had blinded him, and now the cracks were showing in front of everyone. Just when the room was slipping into chaos, Daniel calmly spoke up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady. "I believe there's been a mistake. If I may, I have a corrected version of the presentation." Every eye in the room turned to him. Michael's jaw tightened, but he had no choice but to step aside. Daniel connected his laptop and delivered a flawless pitch. His data was accurate, his tone confident, his answers precise. By the end of the meeting, the clients were smiling, nodding, and shaking hands. The deal was saved, and Michael's credibility was shattered. Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The silence in the boardroom after the clients left spoke louder than any words. The executives exchanged looks, their confidence in Michael evaporating, while Daniel stood tall for the first time in months. The plan was working. And Daniel wasn't done yet. Michael's downfall had begun. The failed pitch meeting had left him exposed, but in corporate life, one mistake rarely spelled the end. Daniel knew this. If he truly wanted justice, true revenge, he needed to make sure Michael didn't just stumble. He needed to make sure Michael fell so hard he could never climb back up again. The weeks after the disastrous presentation were tense. Michael avoided Daniel whenever possible, but the damage was already done. Clients began requesting Daniel directly instead of Michael. Around the office, whispers turned into open doubt. How did Michael even get that promotion? Wasn't Daniel the one fixing everything? Michael's confidence cracked, but he clung to his position desperately, working longer hours, snapping at employees, and trying to patch together his authority. Daniel, meanwhile, remained calm. Outwardly, he was the loyal team player, supporting Michael, nodding in meetings, offering quiet assistance. But behind the scenes, his file of evidence continued to grow. Expense reports padded with fake numbers. Emails where Michael shifted blame onto subordinates. Documents where he exaggerated results. Every careless mistake Michael made, Daniel documented carefully. And then came the opportunity Daniel had been waiting for. Whitmore Industries scheduled its annual board review, a high-stakes meeting where managers presented their yearly performance and strategies for the future. It was a chance to impress the board, but also a chance to expose failures. Michael was terrified. He spent days preparing slides, staying late at the office, barely sleeping. Daniel waited until the night before the review. When most of the staff had gone home, he slipped into the office, calm and deliberate. He knew Michael's bad habits by heart, storing sensitive files without encryption, leaving reports in shared folders. Within an hour, Daniel had copies of everything he needed, inflated numbers, falsified client reports, and even emails where Michael mocked the executives behind their backs. By morning, Daniel was ready. The boardroom was packed with executives in tailored suits, their expressions sharp and expectant. Michael walked in, pale and nervous but forcing a smile. He began his presentation, rattling off statistics, growth percentages, and glowing success stories. For a moment, it seemed he might scrape through. Until Daniel raised his hand. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I'd like to clarify something about those numbers." The room went silent. Daniel rose from his seat, a thick folder in hand. "Over the past year, I've worked closely with Michael, and I've noticed discrepancies in the reports being presented. With respect, the figures you're seeing don't match the company's actual performance." Gasps filled the room. Michael's face drained of color. "That's a lie," he spat, his voice cracking. "Daniel's trying to sabotage me." But Daniel was calm. He opened the folder, laying out document after document, expense accounts with falsified numbers, reports with forged data, email chains where Michael took credit for projects he hadn't touched. The executives leaned forward, their faces hardening with every page. Mr. Whitmore's voice was cold when he finally spoke. "Oh, Michael, do you deny these documents are yours?" Michael stammered, tried to explain, but every word dug him deeper. The evidence was undeniable. Within minutes, the board had seen enough. "You're finished here," Mr. Whitmore said firmly. "Effective immediately." Security was called. Michael's protests turned desperate as he was escorted out of the building. He glared at Daniel, eyes full of rage and disbelief, but Daniel didn't flinch. He simply watched as the man who had betrayed him was stripped of everything he thought he had won. The room fell silent again once Michael was gone. Then, slowly, the executives turned to Daniel. "You've shown remarkable diligence," one said. "Without your intervention, the company could have suffered greatly." Another added, "We need leaders who value integrity. Daniel, would like you to step into the role Michael vacated, effective today." For the first time in months, Daniel allowed himself to smile. He had reclaimed what was rightfully his. Not through lies, not through shortcuts, but through patience, intelligence, and a carefully executed plan. As he left the boardroom, colleagues congratulated him, shaking his hand, clapping him on the back. But Daniel's thoughts were quiet, inward. He remembered that night in his apartment, the bitterness of betrayal burning inside him. Now, the fire was gone. The wound had closed. Revenge, he realized, wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about justice. It was about balance, restoring what betrayal had tried to take away. And in that moment, Daniel Harris understood the truth: revenge is sweetest not when it's loud, but when it's silent, and absolute.